Most often than not, we get people, especially from Indian origin or Chinese origin. They're subject to this big backlog of green card, and they want a shorter way, and they've been successful in their lives here in the US, and they were able to save up some money, or they borrow some more from their family members and put together some 800K, or sometimes $1 million. They're really not investors. They're looking for an expedited way to
Hmm.
get a green card, that get ahead of that backlog.
Yeah.
Now, in that case, some people say, okay, shall I open up a business, hire 10 people, invest about $1 million? Would I get a green card that way? Or, what are some of the ways that I can get a green card through EB5, doing what I'm professionally trained for? So how would you look at, EB5 applications that way? And what would sort of like be your advice to those people who are in that kind of situation where they don't necessarily have $800,000 to risk on a regional center, yet they need an expedited way to get a green card?
Yeah. Well, you're totally right about the expedited way. I mean, that's part of the EB5 renaissance in the last couple of years since they changed the law. The big influx again of Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese as well investors because they can skip the line basically that existed before or for other categories. Now, if we're talking about a case where the client, first of all, doesn't have that 800,000 himself or herself, like you said, it's very common to maybe get either a gift or a loan from parents, close friends. You could even do it from a bank or a financial institution, either in the US or your home country. There are even some regional centers that are financing investors as well. Like they want the investors to at least put up 50% of the money, but you can finance with the regional center. So it's not the regional center directly, it's an affiliated entity that they have that are lending out these funds. But I think that's a very interesting innovation. I mean, you did not have that 10 years ago, right? There were
Right.
not regional centers out there financing this. But I think it's a great idea because, right, people might, they might have 400,000, but not everybody's got 800,000 lying around. And if you can, again, there's sources of finance. I think it's a great opportunity for people. But to answer your question, if I understood it correctly, is what about these people that want to continue their professional activities and maybe do a direct business here in the US related
Right.
to what they're doing? I would say, from my experience, that's a somewhat risky proposition. I'm not saying it's doesn't work, but you've got to understand the EB5 world is not the business world. Meaning the requirements of the program are really crazy sometimes. I mean, it's sometimes defies, I wouldn't say defies common sense, but it challenges common sense, like why the government has these certain rules and regulations. So something you would do purely from a business perspective might create problems with the EB5 side. And so people kind of run into that when they have their own business and they're doing that for EB5 purposes. Again, I'm not saying it's crazy stuff, but there's certain requirements you have to do when you hire the people, how long they got to be working, where the location is if they're working, are they working remotely, not remotely. These generally are resolvable issues, but it can be a headache. It's a bit of a headache ensuring compliance. And so from that perspective, when you go with a regional center, they take all those burdens on themselves, right? I mean, first of all, they're experienced in this. They've been doing this for years,
Right.
and they know exactly what the requirements and how you do it, and they make sure you check all the boxes that are required. We do work with clients who do direct investments as well in their own businesses. For our practice, as well as general, overall statistics, I mean, it's maybe but like 3-4% of all investors do it that way. There's a flip side to this, right? You're going to get much more, assuming, you run your business well, you're going to get more than a 1% return on that investment.
Sure.
So, if you feel confident in your business, here's what I would say. In what cases do I think maybe a direct investment makes sense for a client? If they've got a partner here in the US that they're going to be working with, because you imagine it, right? You're coming from a foreign country. Even if you visited the US for many years, it's one thing to visit. It's another thing to run a
No, maybe
business.
maybe you're already here on a different visa,
True. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's true too. Yeah. H1B, maybe something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, if you've been here, yes. So getting back maybe what an ideal client is for this scenario that you're proposing. Maybe you've lived here for a long time, in some other status, H1B, something else, and you've got a good business here. You've got a good handle on how to do things, and you feel, yes, you could easily, launch this EB5 business. Maybe you've got another business with a partner, but you want to, split off from him, create your own company, but you're going to take the clients with you or whatever the production you're doing. It would be pretty straightforward. Yes, in that kind of scenario, I would agree. It might make sense to do a direct investment. You will pay more in a direct investment for the legal fees and other stuff, but at the end of the day, you're probably saving money as opposed to going to the route of the regional center because theoretically you're going to be making more money. And so your upfront costs are going to be a little bit more because you've got to, when we're doing a direct investment, we have to prepare the business plan ourselves. We got to do the operating agreements, other documents. That's work that the regional center will do. But in the long run, again, if you feel positive about the long-term prospects of your business, yeah, you're going to probably come out better in the long run. The two things I maybe should just mention, Aladdin, about when you're doing a direct investment, but this is true for any kind of business, whether it's a regional center or a direct business, there's two main criteria. You're investing the minimum amount of money and you're hiring 10 employees per investor. That 10 employees is usually what gets most clients. I mean, we have a lot of clients, they could invest $1 million in a business, but when you tell them, okay, you're going to have to hire 10 people, W-2 employees, not subcontractors, not 1099, but W-2
Yeah, then it
employees.
gets expensive.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't have a
And
need
your
for those 10
business may or
people.
may not need those employees.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're taking on a burden just to qualify for E2. It may not, sorry, EB5,
Mm-hmm.
and it may not make business sense at the moment. And I guess to complement your point, you would only do that if it makes sense. So, for example, you're already going to invest, I don't know, $3, $4, $5 million, or you're going to employ minimum 10, 15 people anyway, and it's a bigger operation, then you're saying, yeah, then absolutely would definitely make sense.
Sure.
But you don't venture, let's say you were able to raise $1 million, out of your own savings,
Mm-hmm.
from family and friends and gifts and loans and whatever not. And that's the only thing you have. And you go into a business just to get the EB5. You're saying it could be a little bit of a, dangerous territory, because the business may or may not need those implications that would be imposed by the EB5 program.
Mm-hmm.
You would then be better off just going for a regional center. I
Correct.
get that.
Yep.
Thanks. Now, just to tap it off, let's talk about the franchise route, which happens to be our bread and butter,
You
right?
bet.
We usually work with investors who prefer the E2 visa. They would come and buy a franchise and invest usually around 150, 200K, or even sometimes $300,000. Buy a franchise, build it, get the E2 visa, and then follow a different, green card path. But sometimes we do have investors, and they have much bigger budgets, and they want to buy a business or open up a franchise, invest $1 million or more, and apply for the EB5 program that way. Now, right there, I have two questions. First of all, does that work? Again, I think you would say that it would work. Second of all, what I'm going to say is that, say we bought the franchise at a much lower amount, but we worked the business and we reinvested profits back into the business, and now it's over, say, $1.5 to $2 million, and I already have more than 10 people working for me.
Mm-hmm.
4 years down the line, do I still qualify for the EB5?
Yeah. Yes, you would. The short answer is yes, you would. Ironically, as you described it, it sounds like a very or possibly enticing option for people. From my experience, though, there's very few people that have gone that route where they start with the E2 with a smaller amount. They invest maybe 200,000, and they build it up, hire more people, subsequently invest more money, and then later qualify for the EB5 and then transfer over. I mean, yes, you're absolutely correct in how that works. But for whatever reason, at least from our experience, and maybe that's just some of the clients we work with, we maybe one or two people only over the years has gone down that route. I'm not sure why that is, but
I think I have an idea, because India and China are the countries that are subject to the backlog, and they do not have E2 treaties.
That's
So
true.
if you were to
Yeah,
have a lot of Indians doing E2s, maybe then they would convert them to
I
EB5
suppose. Yeah, yeah,
later down the road.
yeah.
But people, other nationalities, they would find, much faster options such as EB2 NIW or even EB1A in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, absolutely. Assuming they're talented, right, and meet the requirements for the EB1A or
Sure.
NIW. But yes, you're totally right. The one important factor I would just emphasize here. So as you described it, it's correct. The main thing to keep in mind then is, let's say you invest 200K, You don't have 800K at the time you started the E2 business, but over time, you're generating more revenue from the business, et cetera. What's critical is you've got to take the money out of the E2 business, as dividends, pay taxes on it.
Pay taxes on them.
Yeah, and then reinvest it back into the company. And at that point, that additional money you're putting back in, that gets counted for purposes of the EB5. And once you hit that threshold, like say of 800,000.
So the cost of that to you is actually way more than $1 million, including the taxes you pay.
I guess, yeah, if you count the taxes, yeah.
Yeah, take it out and put it back in.
Correct.